You know, in all the shows we've done and all the people we've interviewed, I mean, I remember a lot, but I certainly don't remember everything. But, you know, we asked the question, so what do you like about your work here, working in this small organic farm? And she lit up.
Yep.
And she said, well, you know, you get up early in the morning, the air is crisp, the birds are singing, it's quiet. You go out and there's dew on the plants. You're cultivating them, maybe you're doing some weeding. And then she summed it up by saying, and you know, at the end of the day, there's just nothing wrong with that. You know, so just, you know, to be able to say that about the work that you do, there is nothing controversial about what she was doing. And she was feeling good about her work too.
I think it's how few people rave about their work. You know,
not many.
I had a fun job, and I loved it dearly. And I see that there's that connection of people to the earth and to the planet, whatever it takes.
Working around the farm is just, it's busy, but it's like, do you rave about it? I don't reel out and to tell people, it's like, this is the most wonderful industry in the world. It's hard.
It's hard.
It's just hard. I mean, it's not all flowers. That's what kills me, is people are like, oh, you just deal with flowers all day? They're like, that must be nice.
I worked for a chrysanthemum grower
I did
in
that
the
too.
summer, and it was 95 in the greenhouses first thing in the morning, and it was 120 in the afternoon.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I won't mention I
greenhouses
weighed 110 when I
Greenhouses
left
are
that
tough.
place.
Sure you
But I knew, as much as I enjoyed floriculture and the industry, that there had to be an understanding of how the production worked. But that's not where I wanted to spend the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people start in floriculture. I did, working for the Van Wingerdens.
Oh, yeah.
And grew, 50,000 mums for Walmart.
But you had
Yeah.
got some practical experience.
It's a very
and that's
practical
huge.
experience. And I think it's almost, in horticulture, sometimes, especially from a grower perspective or a landscape perspective, having a 4-year degree isn't as beneficial as having some college and a whole lot of work
yeah.
experience.
I started when I was 14.
No kidding.
wow.
It's the only job I've ever had. My neighbor was like, go up there and get a job. I was like, sure, man, cool. I'm like, really? He did hire me. He was like, who are you? I was like, Scott's my neighbor. He's like, all right, we start Monday at 8. And I was like, so I'm hired? And that's just how it was back then.
Do you have any teenagers like that age working there now?
Yeah, we have some. It's hard to
It just
get 'em
doesn't seem
out.
like that's something that people do
It's not an
nowadays.
industry where you're
No.
like, oh, I'll get covered in dirt all day. Let me sign up. They're like, I can work in a building.
Or sweat.
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I mean,
Do you have people coming to you, young people, because they want to learn horticulture or they just need a job?
need a job. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Need a job.
And that's a big
awesome.
problem for this industry because
I know.
we
Well-
don't necessarily have a professional standard, and that is only going to drive, well, it's going to drive the whole business down.
I know. It's been
And that's something
scary.
that every
It's
nursery,
been
every
scary.
landscape company, I think public gardens are really doing the very best job of setting a professional standard.
And it's so difficult, though, to hire people who
Yeah.
understand the amount of physical labor in all seasons
And
all climates.
And
that-
it's
that-
again, once they get into it, if you want to stay, because both of y'all
Yeah.
were like, maybe, I mean, you
Yeah.
understood and you like to know how it was done, but you're like, this isn't quite for me. And
This isn't the aspect I want to dwell in.
And I
full-time.
understand that, and I get
But-
it's tough.
Yeah.
Was Growing Mums your first commercial horticulture job?
It was.
Did you go there because you needed a job or because you wanted to learn horticulture?
No, I wanted to learn. My advisor set me up with this internship for the summer, and it was.
How old were you?
I was
19, you said?
19, yeah.
Did you do plants with your parents? Did you do plants with your mom?
Well,
'Cause I did.
My
That's what I think
grandparents
got me.
were really into.
Okay.
They had a beautiful ornamental space, and then they grew a lot of vegetables because they were immigrants from Czechoslovakia and didn't have access to the food that they wanted.
So they grew it.
But we were hours away, and so when we would visit them, that was certainly an influence. But my parents didn't get into horticulture until I started studying it in college.
How about that?
So we managed, I think there were 147 taxus that were sheared in rectangles and cones, and then 7 acres of turf. And that
Yeah.
was like main responsibilities for me, mowing grass
Yeah.
and shearing hedges.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing that I got into horticulture because those are possibly
Yeah.
the two worst
Well, yeah, that's
aspects of
rough.
management.
I remember my grandmother going,
That's rough.
there's your daddy, an engineer with Western Electric, and you're in agriculture. 18 syllables. Agriculture. And that was the only step down for where she and my grandfather were socially and professionally. Now, my mother's family were already they were sharecroppers. Yeah, they knew what hardwood was on the
Yeah.
farm. So we
Yeah.
had some nice things around our house, but yeah, not full out agriculture. But when Grandma started getting plants from the floriculture trials, the latest in African violets, the gloxinias, the hydrangeas, the things that needed a home, coleus, all of a sudden, that's really not so bad. If you want to keep studying that, that's
Yeah.
all right.
Well, that's great that kind of fussy ornamentals are what turned
Yeah,
her
it
around, you know?
At that point, there were like city people and country people, and the country people were aspiring for like, more education, moved to the city. She couldn't understand that could possibly be a major or pay anything.
Her perspective was completely different from the professional
yeah.
side of the industry. Yeah.
And
Well,
thinking,
on the professional side of the ornamental industry was hardly even in existence.
barely.
You know,
Barely.
I mean, this is a young industry, really, when you look at
Yeah.
it in the perspective of other professions.
Very true.
It's container growing
still be
trees and
growing,
shrubs
which
is
is-
not
should
something
just still be
that
on the
was
peak.
mainstream 50 years ago.
No.
And that's why I think we still have distribution issues. Like, we have garden centers that don't have an identity. They are either a plant center or they're an interior decorating place that happens to sometimes carry
Sell plants.
And then you have, you know, mom and pop where they grow some things, but then they don't have the landscape component. So they have herbaceous but not woody. And we live in a world where landscapes require both. You know, you can't only grow perennials, and you really shouldn't only just grow woody ornamentals. We should have biodiverse ranges of landscapes that are easy to access, that people pay professionals to manage and install.
And well, that's it. And that people have lost the connection
They
to
take
some
them
of what
for
they're
granted
growing.
is what it is. People
Yeah.
take plants for granted.
My parents
nowadays.
certainly understood
I mean, I've
woody
asked
plants
friends,
around.
I'm like, they're like, we walk outside, and I'm like, yeah, that's a nice tree. They're like, oh yeah, that's a big tree, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. It's just like it's in their eyes, but it never comes into focus.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
exactly right.
a
It's
lot
there,
of-
but they don't see it.
No,
Plant
and
blindness.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that because that's almost the beauty of plants. They're there, and you don't even know you're enjoying them. But we need people to recognize them that it is like very important. It's very important to have.
Well, they would
plants
miss them if they
around.
went away.
Exactly.
I always tell
Exactly.
people, let's go, why do zoos bother with landscaping, with horticulture? And go, just a moment. Take a breath. You wouldn't be breathing longer than 3 minutes if it weren't for plants.
The air
You'd have starved to
machines.
death if it weren't for plants. And our animals all depend on plants, even the carnivores, because they're eating the herbivores.
Exactly.
So everything connects through the plants. They tend to be less life-threatening than the tigers, so you don't tend to notice them so much.
Yeah.
Well, that's
But
true.
they're there.
It's passive.
They're there.
Your appreciation of plants
And
is,
all of a
is
sudden they're
Very
going,
much.
oh, that's why.
intuitively passive. Yeah.
And we get a captive audience, so that if we represent different habitats and the viewing area changes from animal to animal or region to region, Asia to Africa, or to formal gardens, at some point somebody's going to notice something unusual in the landscape and stop and look.
Yeah.
And hopefully
People do.
appreciate it and learn
I'll say
it.
people do, because it is, like I said, my sister has a pass to the zoo, and she loves it. She's seen not in a bad way, she's seen the animals so many times, now she just enjoys like looking at the landscape. She's like, they do a great job there. I'm like, I know, Erin. I know. So it's nice, but I mean, again, she's coming from a family where we're out there taking Daphne cuttings, trying to root Daphne cuttings, because my mom's like, I know these are tough to grow. So, I mean, like, she comes from a mom that loves plants, so.
Yeah.
I hope a lot more people.
Well, it's an issue because people say of my generation, our generation, may not have that exposure. And now if kids aren't introduced to it through schools, it's truly lost. And I don't
That's a
believe
good
that you
point.
form hobbies late in life. I think that you get introduced to something, you get comfortable, you build confidence. You may lose it for a few years, but you're more
Still
likely
your
to
roots,
gravitate
back
back
to
if
it.
you've been
Yeah.
introduced early. And that's why this whole industry needs to focus on ways to get horticulture in elementary schools.
I can tell you from the episodes, and we do it every year, we film at least one episode involving a school and children and gardening. And it is like candy to them. They
Yes.
cannot get enough of it.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. I went back to a teacher of mine. We had some extra flats of some pansies. So I brought her flats of pansies, like pots of dirt and little pots. And I was like, Miss Michelle, you're gonna get all your kids to grow their own flowers. And she called me like, what, maybe months later, and she's like, Matt, that was the best thing in
Right.
the world. Every one of those kids, like you said, it's like candy. They
Yeah.
were, did mine grow? Yours has 2 blooms, mine only has 1. You know, it got them on it.
Well, I can give you a couple examples real quick. Like the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley, California.
Yeah.
It's like the most famous schoolyard garden in the world. And that's a group of middle schoolers and middle schoolers.
That's cool.
Wow.
And it's like, you know, middle schoolers are probably not thinking about horticulture, but the Edible Schoolyard has it so going on that these kids get to come out to the garden twice a week. And you know what it's like when they're going from one class to the next to
Oh,
the next.
yeah.
They're like, they don't even want to get to that class. But when it's their day to be in the garden, and we were there filming one day, they were like running or skipping. I mean, they could not wait to get to the garden. They had an hour and a half in the garden, and they didn't want to leave it when it was over. But when it was over, they went into the kitchen that was right next to the garden, and they were making things from what they had just
Wow.
See,
harvested.
that's just so
Wow.
cool to them.
Right. And then in one other
That's
quick
so
example, in New York, a couple of moms wanted to teach sustainability in the school, and they wanted to do it through some sort of growing, but they weren't thinking plants. But anyway, it evolved into a greenhouse on top of the roof of this school in Manhattan, right near Central Park. And so these kids, these elementary schools, 0 to 8th grade, kindergarten, 8th grade, when they got introduced to this, not only could they not wait to come to their designated class time, but they started getting their parents to bring them to school early. They would take their lunch and eat it in the greenhouse. They would stay after school and spend it in the greenhouse. And then they would any chance they had beyond when they were allowed to be there, they would spend their time in the greenhouse. They could not get enough of it.
Do you know the story behind that? Whether that was a teacher at the school that built it up? Was
Two
it-
moms were behind it, and they
Okay.
went out and reached out to corporations to get some
That-
funding.
that's cool.
And it
Okay.
all evolved, and then it turned into a goal of putting 100 classroom gardens in this New York City school district. And it was a lot of hydroponic growing. But I get goosebumps when I think about it, because these kids, because every academic discipline is learned in a
Yes.
garden, and that's what the school system was doing.
Yeah, the STEAM is making it so that you can connect horticulture to curriculum that's testable. And that's so important because the schools are not there to teach practical knowledge.
Right.
They're there to get good test scores.
Exactly.
This school district in Glassboro that I've been working with on creating foodscape campuses. So instead of it being where you tear out the turf and put in raised beds,
Right.
these are utilizing the foundation landscapes of the elementary schools. And this makes it so that it works in conjunction with the management of the property. And every classroom has their own wing. So they actually have a whole lot more space than they would just having a raised bed. But I was up there doing a seed sowing initiative. And it was remarkable to me because these two kids came up and they were filthy. You know, they had been playing in the soil, they had been putting out mulch, and they were like, we're finally the same color. Gardening finally made us the same. And I think that this industry could learn a lot from those 8-year-olds because
Oh, yeah.
we're still very much focused on people that have, you know, a lot of disposable income. We aren't very much racially diverse. And getting kids in schools completely eliminates those factors. This will be a priority for them when they're older, regardless of the situation they're facing.
Right.
You trick the kids into eating turnips. My neighbor's kids now love turnips because they grew them and they harvested them.
Because they grew them.
You know?
Planted Peruvian purple
And
potatoes in my garden.
Their parents
with the
over
children,
my
yeah.
age won't try anything.
No.
Right.
So I'm giving up on people my age and millennials. I just want to put all my energy into 8-year-olds.
Yep.
They're a much better audience. plants.
I planted Peruvian purple potatoes, and the kids next door used to love to come over and help in the garden. They're very sweet kids. And we planted the purple potatoes, and then after dinner, ding dong, Miss Marie, did we plant purple tomatoes or purple potatoes? I said, we planted purple potatoes. Thank you. And back next door. Well, a few months later, we were digging, and I had a great 2-quart harvest of purple potatoes, and I gave them a quart of potatoes. After dinner that night, ding dong, Miss Marie, we made those potatoes for dinner tonight, but Kelsey didn't eat hers. She'd come over to snitch on her sister.
She didn't eat her own potatoes?
She didn't eat her potatoes. She didn't like potatoes anyway.
Well, she hadn't had these potatoes.
No, she had.
That's right.
She
Big
hadn't.
difference.
So it rubbed off.
Yes.
It rubbed off, like through the kids, you know, and that wonderful innocence, and how they were struck by awe of something growing. And when you can connect with that awe response, and I think at anyone, you
I
got
try
them
to get them
hooked.
with tractors. When you get young kids around
And the
tractors,
equipment.
oh yeah. They're like, you get to ride tractors all day?
Oh,
My
yeah.
nephews, 1 and 2, I'm like, that's right, you can be farmers, boys. You want to ride tractor? Let's go.
Well, it's appealing to different generations. The boomers who remembered and could play their hippy-dippy years later in retirement too, are editing their gardens for easier maintenance, or be living in areas now where they can't have as extensive a garden or plants to care for.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get a lull in a sense, but they're teaching their grandchildren. Or maybe my granddog, who really loves blue fescue. He can chew up blue fescue real quick. But yeah,
We got plenty to replace
it's that
those
next
with.
generation. But there's
Give us
kind
a
of a
call.
wobble in the population who are purchasing plants and why, and
Definitely the
watching
why.
the trends in the population. That boom generation will be thinning in numbers for a while. It's keeping that interest
The millennial
going.
generation is so much larger, though,
Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
from a sheer perspective of population, plant sales will increase.
Well, to hook them, we've got to get them interested.
Well, at
Yeah.
least if they're living in the suburbs, they're required to have a basic
Yeah, there's
horticultural
that's right.
palette. And for me, I think working in the landscape industry, I'd like to see states and municipalities only increase the value of horticulture by saying, maybe change that 80-20 ratio of turf to landscape
Oh, yeah.
to 60-40 so that we increase the bed space and make it so that people have more land that they feel comfortable managing, or empower landscape companies to do a better job in the services they provide. And I think that's a huge area that could be developed and grow. The services that many landscapers provide now don't meet my needs or the needs that I perceive of younger people.
This is an interesting comment because my observation, I live in the suburbs and have for decades. You know, the homeowners want the mow and blow people. They just want somebody to cut the
Yep.
grass,
Yeah.
blow the driveway,
Get it done.
and get out
Get
of there.
out. Yes, sir.
And honestly, the crews, that's all they know how to do.
Right.
And there's nobody that I'm aware of going to sell the idea of home horticulture and drive up an interest and a market for a more professionally managed landscape.
Well, and as the consumer changes, their ethics change. And so, like, baby boomers took an aesthetic that was very similar to a golf course. But that is not the driving aesthetic of a millennial. And so,
Yes.
mobile and go will likely not really be facilitated for people
That's
in the millennial era.
Moving forward.
And so, you know, that's where I think the industry can really evolve to meet the growing needs as millennials become more economically
I think
empowered.
because like you're saying, they're gonna understand they want more. Oh well, I really want this drought tolerant plant.
I
Or-
want
Or
my
natives.
landscape to
And
be
then when
safe.
they start
I want this to
asking-
be
There you go.
ecological.
That's
I want
right.
to eat from this.
And when they start asking
Yeah.
the mow and
Right.
blow guys, they won't get an answer. And like you said, they could very slowly start working towards more certified professionals to do it.
People don't
Precisely.
want to pay for it. I've got friends
That
that are
is
estate
true.
gardeners,
I understand. You're right.
and
You're right. They
trying
don't
to
wanna pay.
educate a
It's the
person
last thing on the
as
list.
to why it's
Yep.
important. And it doesn't matter whether they have a private jet or whether they just have, you know, a woody wagon in the driveway. Getting people willing to make that investment, and in that perception, too many have still got the, you got to make square hedges. You got to make meatballs.
It's a commodity.
And yeah, the green turf even, because now we're in suburbia. Now we are middle class. We are on our own, and realizing there is something else. But having a crew leader or salesperson that can educate the homeowner.
Do you think that's also a standard that the industry has perpetuated? I mean, when
Oh,
I
yes.
look at this industry in the time I've been here for 15 years, all we have talked about is low maintenance.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we lie on our plant tags, and we give the illusion that it doesn't take any effort, and if you fail, you get your money back.
Right.
Instead of cultivating the concept of gardening, which is an active hobby.
And
That is
it's
a
across
really good
time.
point.
You know, and I never hear the green industry promoting anything other than landscape. And landscape and garden is not the same thing. They are simply not. One is passive and one is active. And, you know, if we want to cultivate people that are actively engaged, the first point shouldn't be that it doesn't require any effort.
That is our number
Right.
one question.
You know,
Low
no,
maintenance.
is the
I need something I ain't
usefulness
got to
of it,
touch.
the function.
We
of
get
it.
it all day long.
This will
Right.
give you cut flowers.
that
This
you're
will give
saying
you
that, you're
fruit.
like, yeah.
There's
Yes.
that need to have some function rather than this is a green meatball you're going to have to cut every other weekend to keep it shaped up.
Or this is a plant that all you do is stick in the ground and walk away, and if you do anything else, you may fail. So
Yeah.
just don't do anything. You know, I really am weary of the direction that our industry has gone with regard to the information we dispense.
Oh, yes.
You know, we first say flower color, and then we lie about the size, because let's face it,
Ah.
there is no truth on any single plant label. If they would at least just call it a 10-year size,
Yeah.
instead
That
of
would
giving
help.
the impression that it's the ultimate size.
That would help.
You know, but I don't buy clothes because of a description on a label. I buy it because I like it, or I buy it because it feels good,
And
or
it fits
makes
the
me feel
situation
good.
and it's aesthetic.
Yes, and I think if plants were labeled like this Nepeta, your cats are going to fall over with excitement. I would buy it regardless of anything else. That's the only description I need. And I'm not alone. I know that I am not the only consumer that wants something other than bullet points that our industry, for people like us, think is valuable, but doesn't resonate to consumers.
We're not connecting at an emotional level with
Right.
the consumer. We're selling a commodity. But like, okay, this Nepeta will look good in your landscape. Oh, that's nice. Your cat is going to go crazy over this. And their beloved cat.
Yeah, that's
You mean
right.
this is going to make my beloved
Mittens?
cat
You
happy?
really?
Right. Oh, I'll take all you got. Suddenly there's
I
a
need
connection.
5.
Because we're hitting them at the emotional level, and that's what drives people to take action. It's not the knee-jerk thing. It's something deeper, and it's the emotion, and we've got to connect there. But the landscape industry doesn't. I hate to say it, but they just don't get that. I mean, they're so driven to compete at a commodity level that they're not thinking deeper.
And they're not acquiring people that value it because their prices reflect the products and services they provide.
They are literally
which are really subpar
Right.
in general.
For their job, they are trying to route their guys as fast as they can everywhere they can to get everything done. And that is just not even in the Mo blowing guy's thought. It is just.
So how do we, the four of us,
I was about to say, how do
actively
you leave a
elevate?
task? That's
How do we
all the
actively
time.
elevate? I'm always trying to figure out ways to engage a broader audience.
Bree, it goes back to, like you always talked about, the retail independent garden centers being afraid to price plants more appropriately to what they should be charging for because of the competition with the box stores, and they're just afraid to take the chance because they don't want to starve in the process. And it's the same thing in the commercial landscape business. Is that somebody might like the idea of going out there and educating and taking it to the next level, but in the process they got to pay the bills and keep the lights
Right.
on, and so they can't get out of that rut that they're in. Who's going to step up to the plate?
Well, we all
I was
are.
about to
We're
say-
all speaking on it.
Yeah. I was about
Yeah,
to
but
say,
we're
it's-
also not dependent on a daily basis with our 15 trucks out
Yeah.
there. How many can we turn in a day?
Yeah.
The public gardens are a piece of that. The step in, the big examples. I will point out to people, whether they're coming to a zoo or a botanic garden or whatever, these are big examples. We would hope of,
Like the High Line has for New York.
Yeah.
I can tell you, we just did a survey to nearly 20,000 people, and we asked them we couched the survey to help us to plan future episodes of our show.
Right.
And it was amazing. An overwhelming response was like, they loved seeing these public gardens, but what they wanted was more applicable, hands-on, relatable gardening information from something that they could say, that's kind of like my place.
Yeah.
And they wanted the education, but they couldn't translate it from a big space to a little space. They wanted to have, apples to apples
And
going
part
in.
of that's the difficult educational piece. But how can you teach people and keep it, not interrupt the experience of people walking through too? In our case, our staff was pretty interactive. Horticulture was visible. We were in public spaces all day long to stop and answer questions. But it's true, it's making that translation.
So let me take it up to even a bigger level, and it's reaching. The question is, how do we reach the masses? Because we got to get them to care. So where is that? Through mass media, right? So where I'm actively involved, television. There's no money. I'm probably crazy from a business model to do what I do to try to educate the world on the importance of horticulture and doing it right, sustainably. Because there's really no money there. So who else is going to do it? I'm one show, but we need more of me, and we need more of you guys, and it's still a business model, and we've got to educate. And it almost seems like an overwhelming task.
It's so regional too.
Right, and that too.
And the big networks have cut back so much on gardening shows. You can flip houses,
Because
and
their
decorate all the
their
time.
underwriters or their advertisers
Yeah.
aren't interested in reaching a gardening audience. They want the home improvement.
And even when they
Yes,
did some of the
yes.
curb appeal shows, who didn't cringe that Laura peddled them on 3-foot centers to look good for the cameras when they were
It
done?
was all about the camera. It was all about what
Yeah,
looked good on
it was
TV.
totally flower show staging. It's landscape. And
So there was
what
no
they,
education to that.
They just really taught bad habits, giving people
what not
really
to do,
bad
but they didn't say,
impressions.
don't do this.
I still
Yeah.
think the answer is going to the youngest ones. Get them
I
while
do
they're
too.
young.
I think the
Get 'em while
solution
they're
is
young.
that the whole industry
they're young.
come together as a unified force to have a presence in elementary schools.
That
I think the
sounds-
nurseries do have some budget to be able to put forth to community outreach. And if it was
Exactly.
unified through the State Landscape Association, it would be powerful. Even if that was just $1,000 per nursery,
Yep.
you combine every nursery in a state organization, and that actually gets you somewhere. And then you find corporations that might match donations so that it's not just falling on one or two, say, equipment sponsors,
And
who too often they bear the whole burden, like Kubota and Subaru.
Right.
And they
'Cause they're the
shouldn't be
big dollar
exclusively
company.
responsible for getting quality information out to the masses.
Right.
And we aren't doing anything collectively to push our message.
Right.
It's really an interesting concept that we're talking about here. It's almost like we are making a huge investment for 20 years, 15 years down the road, and kind of
But we gotta have it.
throwing in the towel, but kind of cutting our losses on
With-
the people who are already set in their ways.
Yes, sir. Yep, that's right.
But it kinda makes sense.
Because if you just hear, we were like, what could we do? What could we actually do? Well, the answer is going to the young ones. I mean, that's the answer. 'Cause
Creating a value of horticulture with the actual new generation.
Oh, I say create their mind to what we want them to think. So we think a little different. See, I got
Indoctrinate, is that
Yeah,
what you're
exactly. I'm
saying?
just like, all right,
Brainwash.
you like plants. That's how we put it. You like plants.
I think my entire career, this industry has been not encouraging enough to the general population.
No,
And
it
I'd like
has
to
been
see
commodities
that.
trading.
I'd like to see that change in my lifetime because we have so much more to offer than what we're currently offering with a limited palette of 12 genus at a place like Home Depot. And for too long, I think the ornamental industry has been divorced from edibles and ignored the ecological use of plants.
Right.
The time is now to really bring that all together. Because there's no reason to have divides in our plant palette.